Good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is the Two Tokens podcast, this time from the University of The Hague. And to my right, we have Thomas Dünser from Liechtenstein. We have Frank Verstijlen, professor at the University of Groningen. And of course, our very own Oliver. So I don't need any introductions, but maybe Frank, you can introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Frank Verstijlen. I'm a professor for private law in Groningen, and I specialize in property law and also insolvency law.
Glad to have you here. Thank you. Olivier? Well, you know, everybody knows Olivier, but just a short word.
Well, not sure if everybody knows me, but Olivier Rikken, part of the board of Two Tokens, long-time entrepreneur in blockchain space in the Netherlands, also doing research towards DAOs and governance of DAOs. Built many solutions myself and doing fundamental research at the TU Delft with this regard. So a bit of scientific background, bit of practical background.
I'm told we're going to have a party at the end of the year, huh? Let's not jinx it. Let's not jinx it.
Not jinxing.
No. Welcome all the way from Liechtenstein, Thomas.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Dünser. I'm working for the government of Liechtenstein. My job is to foster the innovation framework for fintech and the digital economy in Liechtenstein. And the Blockchain Act in Liechtenstein was one of my projects. Liechtenstein has introduced a comprehensive approach for regulation of the token economy. So looking at the tokenization of everything. And happy to discuss this approach today.
Yeah. As we are here this afternoon, we have a symposium and we are preparing for the symposium, and you three are the keynote speakers for the first half. And it should be an interesting session, I think, because we bring two worlds together. On the one hand, we have the University of Groningen who's organizing this symposium with us, the lawyers. And on the other hand, we have the digital world, Olivier, tokenization, and those are two worlds that are colliding, it seems like. So,
I wouldn't say colliding, though. It's two worlds that need to get to know each other better.
Well, and it would be nice to see how we're going to learn from each other, but also how Liechtenstein did it. So that's what we're going to be doing this afternoon. Olivier, what do you think? Is tokenization taking hold? Are we seeing adoption in a scale that we should start to wonder about changing laws? Of course, we have markets and crypto assets regulation coming, but
it's a difficult question. We do see more and more adoption, or at least initiatives that try to get a foothold in setting up tokenized projects in itself. And now, as we move away from the drawing table, coming up with designs and ideas, what could be, and we're trying to implement it in a real world, things become tangible for end users, for lawyers, for regulators, etc. So now we really truly have to look at, is it what we think we can do with tokenization? Is it possible under existing regulation and with the existing laws or not? And that's why I said I don't think it's so much colliding. It's now we really have to understand what we're talking about, and we really find out that there are a lot of nuances here and there. So we shouldn't approach tokenizing or tokens as being one thing, because one token can be completely different than somebody else. But also from a token perspective, we shouldn't easily say, hey, we're building something new, because sometimes we're just building something existing on a new infrastructure. And then current laws and regulations still apply, and probably we can still implement
a new bag.
Sometimes, and in a few cases, it might be something new, and the law should change. But I think in a lot of cases, the law can be very sufficient. But that's being an engineer. So now I'm moving away from my expertise field.
Well, but in terms of adoption, you said that Liechtenstein is looking at tokenizing everything. Is that happening? Is that taking hold? Are you tokenizing everything?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I mean, basically, we have started in Liechtenstein with the perspective of token economy, and so when the first companies that wanted to use blockchain came to Liechtenstein in, I would say, 2015, 16. And so they came to me and asked, is this possible in Liechtenstein? They came with the ICO topic. So is it possible to raise money by an ICO in Liechtenstein? And then we had a look at it and said, okay, it is possible. And after that response, I went to the Prime Minister and said, okay, we need to look at this because this is really something, a big story coming, and will change the way the economy can. It's creating a new infrastructure for the economy and also for the financial center, and we don't have any answer to that. And so when we looked at that in the working group, we found out that the potential of blockchain is far beyond just ICOs and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So it's a kind of a new development going into the digital economy. And the digital economy is something we are using today, but as you mentioned before, it's just maybe the same activities that we are doing now with the digital economy, but not using blockchain. It might be better by doing that. So, and when we started that, we have just kind of pushed this development also in Liechtenstein. So many companies came to us and wanted to tokenize everything. In the first years, the creativity was enormous. And throughout all sectors, the companies came to us. And so, but in the last 2 years, I would say this development has slowed down because the friction, it's not a collision, as you mentioned, it's more a kind of a friction that appeared because Liechtenstein allowed the tokenization of everything, but in other jurisdictions, it was not possible because other jurisdictions had a different perspective on tokenization.
And to be sure, Liechtenstein is based on Swiss law, Austrian law. How does that work?
On Liechtenstein law. But
Sensitive,
basically,
sensitive.
no, but from a historic perspective, the Liechtenstein law is based on two I would say philosophies, or so we are mainly based on Austrian law. Everything that was installed before the First World War. And after that, we had a close relation to Switzerland, and many Swiss legal adoptions we have made also in Liechtenstein. So, and some core elements of the Liechtenstein legal environment, like the Companies Act, is a Liechtenstein creation.
Great.
So,
but what kind of? So you said it was being very creative. So of course the ICOs, we all know the wild, wild west, we were there. And raising capital, that would be something that a lot of people would like. We did it fully regulated with Next Gen Capital and Exchange, right? But what other types, and crypto assets, that would be something too that you could tokenize, but what other examples could you think of that the Liechtensteiners were very creative in?
I mean, I have seen the whole bandwidth of what tokenization is about. So of course, every financial market application could use tokens. So a security token is just a logic way to use blockchain. Also, all kind of cryptocurrencies. In the moment, we see that the DAO development coming, so the decentralized autonomous organizations just using blockchain technology for organizing themselves, but also tokenization of real-world assets, so tokenization of real estate, tokenization of gold, and some work well, some did not work well because they wanted to be cross-border, and the friction with financial market regulation was too big.
Yeah.
So, but the also tokenization of art, tokenization. So it's the innovation potential is huge, but it has been slowed down with this regulatory uncertainty, I would call that.
Yeah, that's where we come to Frank, right? So this afternoon we'll have 4 cases, and you said that let's not look at tokenizing a solar panel. Let's look at tokenizing energy, which is a non-good. That's interesting. So that's one of the cases, right?
Yes, that's one of the challenges, but it starts more basic with just the question, how can you transfer property through transferring a token. The property law is not, the blockchain is not new to property law. We've known Bitcoins. We have some literature, quite some literature on Bitcoins and NFTs, and some case law. But when you move to actually transferring real-world assets, not digital assets, but just machines, objects, claims, receivables, then it becomes a whole different kind of ball game, because we have a system in place in dealing with those assets, and tokenization does not really fit into that. So the word token is never used in our civil code. We don't. It's not a word. Actually, it's not. There's no law in force which uses the word token. So if you want to transfer property, you will have to fit this system of tokenization. You have to fit the Bitcoin into the Dutch system of property law, of the system of transfer of property. And that's quite a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think Olivier has something to say about Bitcoin and a token, and you're going to give a little primer on token.
Well, I'm gonna set the scene, because one of the biggest problems that I always face in many of the discussions is that we talk in overall terms without being specific. People talk about crypto and think it's one thing, but a cryptocurrency is something completely than a token, something completely different than a token. And a token can exist in endless forms. So you have to be really specific what you're talking about, because any choice in designing and setting it up can have influence on the governance, and thus can have influence on laws and regulations in itself. So you should really understand what's happening on the technical side to see what the implications are for the governance side, and thus also from a law perspective in itself. And I truly believe that, and that's not only in the blockchain space, it's in the broader sense. Traditional separated areas of expertise need to be more multidisciplinary and work together in going forward, because the traditional separated areas of expertise are getting more and more overlap nowadays.
No, all our working groups are multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
So we have legal, we have finance, we have engineers, and they all learn from each other. And that's the beauty about this whole token economy. And whether we call it a digital economy or token economy, or, we have our tax department, the Belastingdienst, they are now calling it the metaverse. So whatever we call it, tokens are applied everywhere. And it's interesting to see how I think we will need to change some laws, or at least educate the people that make the laws and enforce them. Because the example of the electronic bill of lading, it says that a bill of lading needs to be physical in order to put a stamp on it. And so to get an electronic negotiable bill of lading, we need to change the law. And do you see, Frank, other roadblocks in that regard? You said at one point at one of the expo sessions, you may think that you did the transfer of title with an NFT on the blockchain, but in reality, according to the law, you did not.
Yes, the e-bill of lading is a good example. This could be a possible model to use in a wider context. The bill of lading is typically a product of maritime law. And the e-bill of lading represents the physical bill of lading, but that physical bill of lading, the paperwork, represents the actual goods. So when you deliver the paper, you also deliver the goods. And with this next level, if you deliver the token, you deliver the paper, and then you also deliver the goods. But that's in the setting of the bill of lading. As I said, maritime law, but this model, I suppose, could be used also in a wider context, but it will require that you change the law. And the e-bill of lading will be part of Book 8 of our civil code, and that deals with transportation law, maritime law also. So it is limited to that area of the law, and it will take further development to take that to just the transfer of any object between particular parties outside the maritime world.
And so this also means that every nation needs to change their civil code in some way or another. Then, in this particular case of the e-bill of lading.
I believe so. So we had exactly the same questions when we started our working group. So, I mean, what you have mentioned before, I fully agree. So in our working group, we had 3 engineers, including me, but also others that really coded and understood the technology and also understood the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum and all layer 1 blockchains we have seen at the point of time. So because otherwise you don't understand the legal implications of what you're doing. So, but if you don't have all kind of knowledge integrated in your working group, it's not possible to create a good law, to my opinion. But when we have looked at all kind of tokenization use cases, we have seen that the easiest form of tokenization is a virtual currency with no relation to the real world. Then the second easiest form of tokenization is security tokenization, because this is kind of a similar concept. But as soon as we go to real world assets, it's difficult. So the question is, how can we tokenize a car, or how can we tokenize something like energy? And then we came to the conclusion that it's only possible to tokenize a right that we know from our legal system, and it's not possible to tokenize a physical asset, because if I tokenize, make a physical representation of a car, it can be a virtual model or it can be a picture of a car, but it's not the same. The value of a car is that I can sit in and drive and not have a digital copy of that.
So if I wanted to, suppose I have a gold bar, and I wanted to tokenize that gold bar fractional, would I have tokenized the right to that gold bar or the physical?
In Liechtenstein, so we have introduced, so if you tokenize a gold bar, it's always some right relating to the gold bar. So you can tokenize the ownership right, you can tokenize the usage right, maybe the right to store it, to transport it. So it's a kind of a modular approach to build a bridge between the physical asset and the blockchain. So, and I mean, if you look closer to the concept of a security and also the bill of Leiden, you call it, is it? I mean, we represented at that point of time a right to vote or a right to get dividends from a company on a piece of paper, and it's kind of a objectivation, as I call it, of these rights on a physical item. And with those old concepts are not really they're excellent, and have been the fundament of our prosperity of the last centuries, I believe. And the same step we can now do with tokenization. So that we represent some kind of rights from our legal system on a blockchain system, and we can transfer them. And so the token is kind of as a representation of a right. It gets a new quality because it can be transferred, it can be held, and so it's a bit similar like securitization, but it's just another level of technology. But if you do that, we have to clarify all legal implications, because I can sell you my car, but the ownership right can be tokenized, and those are the difficult things we have to solve also in the civil code. That what is the implication? But we are now, to my opinion, heading in a new phase of our digital economy, and blockchain is kind of the key driver of this development.
Frank, you're going to have a lot of work the next couple of years.
Yes, so I'm very interested in how this is done in Liechtenstein, because you say we are tokenizing rights, ownership rights.
Yes.
It's probably the same in Liechtenstein, but in the Netherlands, if you have ownership, you actually have the car. This ownership and the physical object are identical. They're interchangeable in our civil code. When you say this is my car, you're actually saying I have ownership to this car. So if you tokenize ownership, in the Dutch context, you will have actually tokenized the car itself. If you make that possible, you would actually transfer the car by transferring the token. If the token represents the ownership rights, because ownership is the most comprehensive right to the car, and as I said, it's in our civil code, it's interchangeable.
This is the major challenge I see with tokenization. So you have two objects. You have the car and you have a token which represents the ownership right or the full right of a car. Sorry, but and this is the reason why we have introduced the token as a new element in the legal system of Liechtenstein, and not to say a token is like a physical asset or a physical object, because it's a bit a different concept because it's not materialized, and our legal environment says an object has to be materialized. But it was an option to discuss that we open this approach. But as soon as you have two objects, you have to clarify what happens if the ownership rights are not synchronized. And this is the challenge we need to solve in our legal system. We did that, and it has been done, and it's but it's easier if you have if you store the piece of art or the gold bar in a vault, and it's not movable anymore.
But I think it's the example of the car is quite interesting, because I tend to like to think in analogies. So let's take the analogy of the car. You say the ownership and the object is one in touch, but just for my understanding, I always thought, but that can be my lack of legal knowledge in this case, that the ownership was represented by the registration of the car, the registration card that you have, and by showing that, you can show that you are the rightfully owner of that car. Not the fact that you have the keys to the car, that can be just by sheer coincidence that you have them because you found them, but by having this registration, and this registration is in some way connected to your name, you can prove this is truly my car. And aren't we just digitalizing this registration by replacing it with a token, which makes it easier to be transferable? But maybe I'm
I don't know the system.
Simplifying things now.
I don't know the system in Netherlands, but in Liechtenstein it's like this. So the registration is one thing. But if you are registering a car, you're allowed to hold it and to drive it, but you're not necessarily the legal owner of this car. So the legal ownership can be proven by showing the purchase contract.
Okay. I don't know how it is under Dutch law in this case.
It's similar. I don't know how it is in Liechtenstein, but the registration of the car does not prove ownership.
Okay.
It does not mean that you are the owner. Actually, the fact that you have the keys in your hand is much more convincing proof that you own it. It's not conclusive. It's not conclusive. But this is a particular thing for cars. You have a lot of legislation because it's such an important object. But what you actually, what you register is not the ownership, but the person holding the car. So that if you get a fine, the police will know who to
where to send it.
Where to send it. And but it's very possible that the person who is registered as the holder of the car is not actually the owner. Then you just have to fulfill all the requirements to become the owner of the car, and that's a question of property law, and that does not involve registration.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So in as a half lawyer, it's about you have both layers. You have the legal contract that you transfer the ownership rights to the new owner of the car, but you have also to deliver the car. So it's a It's a two-layer system even today, and what we tokenize is just the legal layer. So for me, tokenization is a legal manner and not really a technical. But of course, techniques is important. But it's about the legal layer to the world's economy.
Yeah. But then again, with this example of the car, how do you prove legal ownership of a car nowadays? Then in the Netherlands, so not by being the holder, the registered person, and come to think about it, if you have a lease car, it's owned by the lease company, and you're just the holder getting the fines in the end. But so how do you prove legal ownership in the Netherlands then? No?
Very often you don't have to prove that you're the owner because you're presumed to be the owner. The fact that you have physical control over the car, the fact that you possess the car creates a presumption that you are the owner. So if I'm driving around in my car and you come to me and you say, hey, that's my car, I don't have to prove anything. You have to prove that I'm actually driving your car.
But you have to prove if you sell the car. That's when you have to prove.
Also, in that case, I don't have to prove that I'm the car owner. If I'm the car owner, I can transfer the car. Then we conclude a contract. It's the same in the Netherlands. And I deliver the car to you. And I do that by handing over the keys. That's the delivery.
But before you hand over the keys, you go to a register and sign over the title in the register to the other person. And then you hand over the keys and you get your money.
That's what is done in practice, and that is because, at least in the old days, I'm pretty sure it's still around, but it was more common in those days that cars are stolen very often. Yeah. And if you buy a car at the market, or you cannot be totally sure that this person who's handing over the keys is actually the owner.
No, I think
then the registration
but
helps.
That's the motor vehicle registration register is used for taxes and insurance, and it's not, and that's why you need that register. Maybe not so much to prove ownership, but yes. if you are liable, they want to come after the person who owns the car.
Yes, but it also has relevance for property law, and that is if I'm not the owner, but you think that I'm the owner. Sometimes you are protected against the fact that I'm not the owner, against the lack of my power of disposal. So you can get third-party protection. But in order to invoke that third-party protection, you have to be in good faith. And then the registration comes in, because in order to be able to invoke your good faith, you will have to show that you have done the proper investigations. So at least you should have to examine the car registration. Is it in my name? Am I the person who I'm holding out to be? Perhaps you should ask me to look at my passport, whether I'm actually Verstijlen, the same name which is in the car registration. So if you do not check all those elements, you will not be protected because you are not in good faith. But if I am the owner, you don't need protection, because the fact that I have ownership enables me to transfer it to you, and with the contract and the delivery, that will make you the owner, regardless of the registration.
So this whole tokenization will have enormous impact on society and the economy, digital economy. So we were asked to write an analysis of what that impact is and what needs to be done. It's funny that we've been on this road for 6-7 years now. Blockchain. When did we first start our first master? In 2015, 16, Dutch Blockchain College. And we never looked at property law.
Not per se.
Huh? It's interesting. Yes, we looked at MICA and crypto assets, and and of course the regulators, BaFin, AFM, they're all involved, but not property law. Better late than never.
But if you have a close look to MICA, you see that they have introduced an approach that is far beyond the first discussions about crypto assets and security tokens. So they have introduced the term crypto assets to represent a right, and as which can represent a right. So this implies that the crypto assets are more than only Bitcoin, Tether, and Ether, and securities, which is excluded from MiCA Title 5. Yeah. So I believe that every country in Europe has to implement a civil law about tokens, so that the full potential of tokenization of crypto assets can be used, so the direct tokenization of any kind of right.
So in a way, MiCA, MiFID, these are European directives. That's fact of life. We have to implement it. But every country by themselves can make the difference in their civil codes.
Yes. And because this is something Europe, as the Commission, cannot influence. It's a national decision what to do. And many countries have regulation about digital securities, digital shares, digital bonds, but not about the rest of tokenization. But it is possible to include all fungible tokens that are not made in the traditional way under MiCA, and to establish kind of trading facilities and so on. And this is the interesting part, because if you look at tokenization of if you want to tokenize a house, you need to use a special purpose vehicle and to issue shares or bonds, and this is a very, very cost-intensive approach. With a direct approach of direct tokenization of a right, you can save the cost for this SPV, and so this is the far more promising approach to all kind of tokenization, except if it's needed to have a security, and this this is only possible if you have the right civil law fundament to do that. And also all other interesting, and to me it's even more interesting to have the non-fungible section. So if you have a ownership right of a car, it's a non-fungible token, and even for that you need the legal certainty of a civil law fundament of tokens.
And even on that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a non-fungible token. That's just a different technical standard.
We're coming to the end of this session. Normally we do half an hour, but this was so interesting. We are 4, so we took a little bit longer. But I give the last word to Frank. How do you see this going?
In the Netherlands in general, or are you talking about the symposium this afternoon?
Well, I'd settle for the symposium, but if you could kind of give us, your insights on where this is going.
Well, I think
in the Netherlands, that would be great.
I think it is a real opportunity to bring together these different kinds of expertise, and I think it's important when you're dealing with tokenization of real-world assets that to take into account that property law is much more strict than other areas of the law. There's a lot of mandatory law, and you cannot deviate from that. And one way or the other, you have to fit the transfer of the token into this property law system, and hope, that's not the right word. Sometimes you will be able to actually transfer ownership on the basis of the present civil code, but in a lot of circumstances it will not be possible. And there, on those points, we will need to change the law if we are to use tokenization in the context of real-world assets. That will take a long time, and that's a difficult question. You're saying it took you a couple of years.
No, to be honest, to write the law, it took us half a year.
How many citizens in Liechtenstein?
We have 40,000 citizens.
Okay.
Or inhabitants.
Yes.
So, but the question is, what took us quite long is, we are hoping that MiCA, we are happy that MiCA is now signed and will be enforced. So this will clarify a lot of questions that all other forms of tokenizations can be done in a legal secure way. So to write the law, it was a very special working group we have set up at that point of time. But it was, if you have the right knowledge at the table, it's possible to find a good way to make it in a short way. But you need to see the whole picture and to create a a good way of the tokenization is possible in your country. And then it's just the rest is about the legal setting of Europe, if it's legally secure to do that or not.
Yes, the legislative process in the Netherlands tends to take longer than 6 months.
The legal to implement the new law takes about 1.5 years or 2 years. So it took us more times just to this process with the parliament and so on. So we published the first report about the law in 2018, and entry into force was on January the 1st of 2020. So it's about, but the working group started in 2016. So it has taken a while to come to the point that it's entered into force.
We don't have the first mover advantage, and so we can learn from others. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, that tends to help. Comparative study is very fruitful also for legislation.
And that's why we should have this symposium and the expert sessions, Olivier, and write the broad analysis that we will publish later this year.
Yeah.
Thank you all, and I look forward to hearing your keynotes this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, just push the button.
That was it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening in, and please subscribe so you don't miss out on our upcoming episodes. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find our contact details at www.twotokens.org.